Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where today I'm going to do somewhat of a response video to Slapperfish Jr.'s video from earlier this week titled Cold War Sucks. Now the first thing I want to say about Slap's video is he did write to me and ask me what I thought about the points he was going to make in the video. And after talking to him, I have to say I think I agree with a lot of things that he's saying. During my last live stream, people did ask me, what are my thoughts on Slap's video? What do I think about what he said? And at the time, I hadn't watched Slap's video all the way through, so I didn't think I couldn't accurately comment. I have now watched his video all the way through, so I can comment. So what I'll do is I'm going to summarize what Slap had to say, and then I'm going to say my own little piece that will go next to what Slap said. To sit alongside it. And then I'm going to go over what I understand of what happens at Wargaming, how the company operates, how tanks come into the game, and then I'm going to propose a solution to the Era 3 issue that we have, and Era 2, I suppose, as well. So, to start off with, we'll summarize Slap's video. So what did he have to say? Well, basically what Slap was saying was, every Era 3 tank is too good. They're too fast, DPM is too high, and there needs to be more variety in the playstyles of these tanks. And what Slap did in his video was he tabulated, He tabulated the statistics for all top Era 3 heavies, and he used the hit points and the DPM to demonstrate that these tanks can essentially take themselves out in less than a minute, which is pretty darn quick. And I think it was like 80% of the tanks could do that. And then he did the same thing with the tier 10 tank destroyers, which is the class, as the name suggests. These are the tanks that are designed to, destroy tanks, tank destroyers. So he did the same comparison, and I think, I don't know what it was, like 30% of the tier 10 tanks could take themselves out in less than a minute. So there's a massive difference in damage output and the concentration of what tanks can and cannot do that. So Slap made a very, very good point using the statistics of the game to back up what he was saying. And I have to say, Slap is very good with the statistics of this game, far better than I am. So I do tip my hat to him for making such a well-rounded point. What I would like to say, alongside everything that Slap said, was and just as a slight aside, I did read through the comments on Slap's video. And as per usual, some people agreed with him completely. Others didn't agree at all. And then others went off on tangents talking about other things. Typical comments for a video of this type. And this Alpine Tiger has no clue. Wow. Anyway, the thing that I would like to say, as on the side of what Slap said, was I think there was a time in Era 2 and Era 3 where the issues that Slap's highlighting weren't as prevalent. And the reason I want to say that is because I think the introduction of one change to Era 3 and maybe Era 2 is what changed everything. So if we rewind the clock, we'll go all the way back to Christmas or November, December, January, late 2022, early 2023. We go back to this period. We have Era 3. And at the time, I believe there was one, I could be wrong here, I believe there was one premium. And that was the Type 59D. And at the time, it boasted the highest penetration of any gun in Era 3. And it was something like 600 millimeters of penetration. And, that was fantastic. It wasn't massive, but it was fantastic. And it was the USP for the Type 59D, and I bought it. I bought the 59D for that reason. Excuse me. Yeah, at the time, I bought the 59D for that reason, because I thought, oh, it's a premium. This is nice. It's unique in one sense, but it's not completely broken. I like this. I like the direction of where Era 3 premiums are going. And during the Christmas break of 22, myself and a couple of other friends, it was the golden age of Era 3, because there was enough variety in the tech trees to keep us interested. You know, you had Challenger 2s fighting Abrams, T-72s, the Leopards. We had this variety. It was very much tank against tank. And there are slight nuances between them. I mean, an example is that the Challenger 2 is good at being hull down. The Leopard 2A5 is good at being hull down. Challenger 2 is not as good as the Leopard 2A5, but if you want to take out the Leopard 2A5, you've got to flank it. So there was this kind of focused tank against tank, which was very much in line with the World War II playstyle. There were nuances to each tank, which you did need to know, because if you didn't know the nuances, you wouldn't win. And the approach that we were bringing to Era 3 at the time was very much based on the World War II approach. We didn't YOLO because that's not what you did in World War II. If you YOLO in World War II, you're dead. We thought more tactically. The teams, as far as I remember, the teams split more evenly because we were bringing the World War II approach to Cold War. And the games we were having were absolutely sublime. They were fantastic. I mean, it was the golden age of 3 marking, 4 marking, the Charlie 2, the Leopard 2A5. It was an absolutely wonderful time in the game. But why was it wonderful? Well, it was wonderful because we didn't have what would appear in February of 2023. The Weasel appeared in February 2023, and I hate to say it, but I reviewed the Weasel and I said, oh, this is amazing, this tank is amazing. And comparatively speaking, yes it is, it still is, but it completely shattered the ceiling of what was, I want to say acceptable is not the right word. It completely broke the balance of Era 3. I'm still not quite saying it right. I don't know how else to say it. But basically, the Weasel introduced this play style of I can go wherever I want because my concealment's amazing and I'm tiny. I can hit whatever I want because my concealment is amazing and I'm tiny. And I've got this whopping ATGM launcher that can smack anything for over 1,000. And I'm so small, no one can hit me. And even if you do hit me, it's going to bounce anyway. So the Weasel completely shattered the gameplay approach. And what I sense happened was folks that played the Weasel then started being a lot more aggressive in their tech tree tanks. And before we knew it, we realized that if we all use our speed together and we drive together as a pack, we can just overwhelm the enemy team one by one. And that's a point that Slap made as well. There's no longer this even splitting of teams where, you know, there's tactics, you play hull down, you take cover here, you push to that point there once that enemy's been taken out. It's very much just, let's all just get together and steamroll everything. That's the problem that I think the Weasel introduced. And now on top of that, we have other premiums that have had power creep, essentially. The Weasel was power creep to an insane level, and it wasn't. I don't. Power creep is the wrong term to use because creep suggests that you're creeping slowly. This was power leap. I mean, we went from the 59D having 50 mil more of penetration to suddenly the Weasel having 200 more millimeters of penetration, and it wasn't just slightly more concealed, it was insanely well concealed, and it wasn't just slightly smaller, it was tiny, and that opened the floodgates to in Wargaming introducing, the Thumper was another one. Insane alpha, insane penetration. The 477, again, alpha, penetration, armor. The 292, alpha, penetration. Just the balance of Era 3 was complete in 2023. The balance of Era 3 was completely thrown off, because up until February 2023, the differences between tanks was so small that nothing really stood out. Nothing really became no one tank was better than anything else, to the extent that it just dominates. And that was evident in the playstyle. If you wanted to do well in the Challenger 2, you had to learn the Challenger 2. So one thing I would slightly disagree with Slap is that they all play the same. They're not quite the same. The differences aren't as big as World War II, but they're not quite the same. So that's where I think everything changed. Now the next thing I want to mention is that in the comments section of videos and in the community, in Discord, wherever you see conversation, it's very easy to think that the differences in conversation that we have are unique to us. I know for a fact that the differences in opinion that the community shares are also shared internally at Wargaming. The only difference is that in a comment section or a Discord server, no one there has the power to actually implement the change that they think should be implemented. At Wargaming, they do. So I would like to make the point, and I want to make this very clear, that Wargaming struggle with the same things that we do. They struggle with, well, should it be like this? No, well, should it be like that? There are internal conversations that are very similar to the ones that we have. And I would almost guarantee that there have been internal conversations at Wargaming that match exactly what we're talking about right now. But the thing is, it takes time. It does take time for these things to change. It's just the nature of business. It is what it is. Speaking of change, I will now come around to what I think would help Era 2 and Era 3. So I've done some research. The top speeds of these tanks are like 70, 72, 75 kilometers an hour. That is very, very quick. But one thing I have found from my research is that these top speeds are listed as on-road top speeds. They're listed as paved road top speeds. So take a freshly paved road, put a Leopard 2A5 on it, yeah, it will do 75 kilometers an hour or whatever it is. But there is a second statistic that the game doesn't take into account, and that is the off-road top speed. And what I want to do here is I want to list some of the off-road top speeds that I've found. So, T-72BU, 45 kilometers an hour off-road. Charlie 2, 40 kilometers an hour. Merkava 3, 55 kilometers an hour. Leclerc, 55 kilometers an hour. M1A2, 48 kilometers an hour. Leopard 2A5, 45 kilometers an hour. Didn't find any data for the Type 90, the Chinese heavy. So we'll just, 40, 45 kilometers an hour, somewhere like that. And what I would suggest, based on these numbers, what I would like to suggest is this. We already have a mode in the game that changes the speed of a vehicle. Swedish S-tanks are an example. When you're out of siege mode, you can go very, very quickly. When you're in siege mode, your speed is reduced. But when you're in siege mode, your gun is very, very accurate. When you're out of siege mode, it's incredibly inaccurate. So, we've already highlighted that the speed of Era 3 and Era 2 is a problem. Without changing too much, without rebalancing entire tech trees, without changing massive amounts in the game, I would like to propose that using the siege mode mechanics, a test be run. every single heavy tank in the game has this mechanic fitted to it, and it's called transport mode or combat mode. If you're in transport mode, you can achieve your 72 kilometers an hour, but your gun is going to be horribly inaccurate. If you're in combat mode, so if you're in combat mode in the Challenger 2, your top speed will be 40 kilometers an hour, but your gun will be very, very accurate. And the reason I want to suggest this is because if you look at the game, it's like 95% of the combat surface we're on is off-road. I mean, Mannheim, for example, you've got those highway bridges. Those are paved, so yeah, you could probably get away with having better accuracy on that. But still, doing 70 kilometers an hour, pulling the trigger and hitting a target that's on the other side of the map just like perfectly, that's not real. And I know the guys at Wargaming, I know the folks at Wargaming that design these tanks, they do model them after realistic. They go out there, and this was something I saw at Tankfest. Plague was there, and he was saying to me, he said, "Oh, it's interesting to be here because I can see that I've modelled this tank wrong, or I've modelled this tank right. You know, that armour plate is actually this shape instead of the shape that we've got it. It stops here rather than stopping there. So I know that these tanks are modelled off realistic stats, realistic figures. But it would seem that the game doesn't account for this, and these are real-world statistics. I've Googled this. These are the numbers from Google, and I personally think that the reason, and Slap mentioned this as well, Era 1 plays well because there's differences in the tanks, and the tanks are slower. I think the game needs to be slowed down, and if we're going to slow the game down and have a reason for slowing them down, here's a real-world reason why. This is a real-world reason as to why the tanks should be slowed down. So that's my idea. Will it work? I don't know. I'd like to think it will. But, yeah, Wargaming. Something to think about there. I know I want Era 3 to change. I want Cold War to change. I do think the premiums have come in and run riot. Slap said that there needs to be balancing changes. The whole of Cold War, Era 2, Era 3, needs to be rebalanced. That is a monumental task, I know that. But I'm hoping that my suggestion here is something that can be taken into account. Maybe it will work, maybe it won't. I don't know. But please, you guys, leave your comments below. Let's discuss this. Let's try and figure out ways that we can make the game better. And that is all I have for this one, guys. So if you've enjoyed this video, please leave it a like, if not a dislike. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.